Hello and welcome to Web Developers Working Week. My name is Peter Fisher. I'm a freelance web and mobile applications developer, and in this show we talk about what I've been getting up to as a freelance developer. So as you can see, the shelf here is completely empty, and that is because we are packing to moving to a new office, a new premises, which is pretty awesome, and I'll be talking about that in just a second. But if I could title this whole week, I would probably title it Hacking and Packing. So this week has been fairly hacky because I've been hacking together a lot of code that I didn't think at the start of this week made any sense whatsoever, but I kind of think that some projects are a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and what you do with the jigsaw puzzle when you solve the jigsaw puzzle is you try and look for the corner pieces, and then you work through the side pieces, and then you start working on the individual pieces that actually fit together within those, and you start to grow and grow and grow into the puzzle. Well, this week I have been doing just that in the programming sense, and I've finally got to the point where things are starting to make sense with some of these third-party applications that I'm actually dealing with. They are using, it's like API endpoints, so I'm having to decipher the API responses, documentation, extremely thin. Extremely thin. So it's kind of trial and error. But I think now I've wrapped my head around it. There is a lot of hacking involved in just trying to get that working with a system that one of my clients is using, and that in itself has proved challenging. And the hacking around has been based on encryption, and this is encryption slightly different to the normal encryption that we have, because this is actually a two-way encryption. Usually with encryption, what you need to do is like have a one-way hash, right? So you encrypt it in perhaps a bcrypt or an MD5, heaven forbid, and that is usually a one-way, right? So you don't often have the ability or the need or the requirement to decrypt that back to its original value. Well, one of the ways that I got around a lot of the troublesome stuff that I've been dealing with this week has been creating mechanisms to decrypt and encrypt data, and it has been quite challenging. It's not something that I really enjoy doing, but it's kind of one of those things. It's done now, so that's and the tests are fine and they run, so that's fine. So I've been using OpenSSL, the OpenSSL encrypt and decrypt, and there's been all sorts of other things that I've been hacking up together to make some projects work. It hasn't been what I would call the best programming that I've ever done. It's just kind of like working with what you've got at hand, and sometimes when you're a freelancer you don't actually have control over the systems that are already in place, right? So you might ask the question, why have you done it like this, or why is there this installed? But at the end of the day, you usually have to just go with what is on the table. If that table is static, you can't change anything. There's been a lot of things that I have changed in my freelance career. I've gone into places and I've taken systems, I've removed systems, I've replaced systems with bigger and better things, right? More simpler systems and so forth. But sometimes you just have to go with what is on the table. And sometimes, regardless of how much you complain about it, you just have to do it, right? You just have to do it. And of course, there's all sorts of influences from external factors there. They might have a cost associated to these things, right? In fact, they usually do, because if you're requesting to remove or replace systems with something else, then that's actually quite a costly exercise. So usually you just have to kind of roll with the punches. And the packing has gone really well. In fact, this office here, it's looking more and more like a warehouse every day. And I think what's going to happen is I'm going to try and minimize the stuff that I actually need to use on a daily basis, as it's getting closer and closer and closer to the actual move to the next office. So what I'm thinking of doing is getting to a point where I no longer need to use the mobile phones that are on my device lab here, and I no longer need to use the iMac or the secondary screen, and I can just work off of the laptop for like however many days leading up to the move. That's kind of like my plan. And the process of moving, so moving from one location to the other location, there's only so much of that you are in control of, and it has been delayed. In fact, it's been delayed quite a few times in the past, but it has been delayed, and it's been delayed because of some random external factor influence that I am not in control of. And I kind of see this as a parallel with project life cycles in web development. There are certain things that prevent projects from going live, prevent features from being created and developed. And those things are completely, sometimes, well out of your control. So, for example, the client could be, they could have financial difficulty. The client could also be on holiday, or the team that foresees certain parts of the system could be on holiday. They could be doing a huge amount of marketing around the time that the initial proposal of deployment is, and therefore they may wish to push that on a little bit further. Or it might go the other way. They actually might require the project to be sooner rather than later. And if that is the case, then I would hope that if it's the case with you guys, if you've ever experienced that, I would hope that you'll be able to negotiate what features can be removed to make the project actually be deployed sooner than it should actually be. But like I said, there's so many things that just because someone has said, yes, this is the date in which I wish to deploy, or in my case, this is the date in which I wish to move, that might be a verbal agreement. It could even be written down, and you could even have signed a piece of paper on it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen guaranteed. And it's one of these things. Loads of people just get so pressured about dates and times and deadlines and so forth, but in actual fact, everything is in flux. Because you could fall ill on the day of deployment. There could be a serious accident on the motorway that morning, which means that you can't get in, which means that you can't do the deployment. You could be seriously ill. Anything could happen. And it just shows how fragile we all are in this sort of ecosystem of trying to schedule things up, trying to deliver things to a agreed deadline. And in fact, the universe, this is me talking all hipster now, the universe doesn't always allow you to do things in the order in which you want to do things in. There has been all sorts of spreadsheets, all sorts of planning that's gone on with this move, right? And also planning on the other side of the move as well. How is that all going to pan out? And of course, everything's had to be moved by a fair bit. And what I'm trying to say in a very roundabout hippie way is that just because something has been set in stone, just because something has been agreed upon, it doesn't mean that that is going to happen, because there are certain things that are beyond your control that may prevent that thing from happening. Now, obviously, you can come up with contingencies. Maybe even if you don't come into work that day, someone else could deploy the code. You could have thought about all of this. You could have had documentation to go through the whole deployment process, which means that anybody can do that, or it could be done through an automated script or something like that. So you can think of scenarios where there are going to be problems and delays and try and mitigate those. This week I've also been doing some work for a client of mine in Texas, and the time zones they really work out well, because often I'm doing work for the client in Texas when my clients are having their dinner, right? So that usually works out pretty well. And if as a freelancer, if you can do that, if you can make the time zones work for you, then that's fantastic. As long as they don't interfere, as long as you're not doing work on another time zone when you should be doing work for another client on your time zone. So working for clients in Texas has actually worked out fairly well, because I usually end up doing the work in the evening, which is pretty good, because the clients that I've got in the UK are obviously just having their dinner when I'm working for a client in the US, which is fantastic. So my days are normally pretty long. And speaking of UK based clients, I've actually got a meeting tomorrow with one of them in Bristol, and I've got a feeling that's going to be very meeting heavy. So I'm going to try and get an early night tonight, because I need to get up by about 5:30 tomorrow to get to that meeting, and then that will probably mean that I won't get in until about 7 in the evening. Again, a very busy day. Why do I get up at 5:30? Well, I have to take a bus and then I have to get a train, but also I like to do a little bit of exercise in the morning if I can. Yesterday I announced a new Python course that I'm developing. It is all about Python control structures. In fact, I have the first 9 tutorials ready, and as normal they'll be coming every Tuesday, so there'll be one tutorial in that course being published every Tuesday. But if you want to get all 9 tutorials, then do become a Patreon, support the channel, and also you'll have access to the Discord server as well, where I can give you some one-to-one mentoring and code reviews and other discounts and announcements and stuff like that. On Friday, I'm going to try and do something a bit different. I'm going to be using the green screen if I've got time, and that video is going to be about an announcement, another course that I'm doing, so do check that out. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.